Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Now, if you're enjoying this show, please do me a favor and tell us about it. Leave us that rating and review so we can get more people to check out the show and also help you with your investing goals. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. And be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, today we're going to be talking to Mike Branam. Mike Branam is the Director of Multifamily Sales at PointCentral, which offers a property automation platform to apartment owners and operators. Now, PointCentral's technology, combined with its parent company, Alarm.com, is installed in over 6 million homes across the U.S. Let's welcome to the show, Mike Branam.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me. It's great to be on with you today.
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you for coming on. We talked a little bit about your background and really a little bit about PointCentral. I didn't really explain what PointCentral is, though. So maybe you could take 2 minutes, give us a little bit more context on who you are, what you do, but as well as what PointCentral offers to multifamily investors.
Sure. So, my background goes back about 20 years now in multifamily and specifically multifamily technology. So, for me, I've always been really interested in both real estate and technology. And if we zoom in a little bit more, I really love to explore how the technical can sort of bridge the interpersonal. So I think that's what's kept me in multifamily all these years, because there's a lot of nobility to me in providing housing. But then how are we using technology to make life easier for our residents? And how do we add value for property owners and make life easier for asset managers that are working at the property on a day-to-day basis? So that's what's kept me in the space. PointCentral specifically, think of it as a smart home technology solution specifically for long-term rentals in multifamily. So we look at this as an opportunity to utilize technology to, check boxes to help, again, property owners, property staff, and the residents. And it's really rare that a technology can check all of those boxes in a very seamless way.
No, I love it. You talked about your 20 years background in multifamily and particularly multifamily technology, and PointCentral really focuses more on those long-term rentals and solutions that help both the renter, the owner, and the management company as well. Let's dig into that a little bit more, because prop tech and just kind of technology in the multifamily space, it's a really broad ranging spectrum. It's interesting because people always say that multifamily and real estate in general kind of lags behind other industries when it comes to the adaptation of new technology. So maybe you can give us a little more context about some of those solutions that you see.
Sure. It's funny because to your point, multifamily is usually a little bit further behind, but I sort of defend the space a little bit because I think there are a lot of additional considerations. For your house or mine, it's a little bit easier to roll out technology. If something doesn't go well, we replace it, or it doesn't affect as many people outside of maybe our wives and kids, right? In a multifamily setting, if something doesn't go right, that snowball gets pretty big. So I think the industry as a whole has had to be very methodical in how they implement new technologies to ensure it checks all the boxes as it relates to, is it an easy implementation? What happens when something goes wrong? Is it secure? There's this whole additional box that we don't want to open necessarily on data and what happens to resident data. So, we do a really methodical job as it relates to protecting resident data and management data to ensure it's private and well kept. So, with the technology as a whole, what I look at is what types of opportunities are out there to refine a process, to provide for task automation or make life easier. And I'll give you an example. COVID sort of triggered this adoption of self-guided tours by force. The leasing agents either couldn't come to work, or the staffing issues became a challenge, or perhaps prospective residents didn't want to tour with someone because it was their buying style, or because they were concerned about being in close proximity with someone else. So that's what really opened the door for self-guided tours. But 6-7 years ago, we were saying, hey, this is actually the way to do it. It's let people see when they want to, expand the hours of the leasing office. Most people couldn't, take a tour from 9 to 5 because it was sort of traditional working hours. And then when they were available, the leasing office closed. right? So the self-guided tour adoption has gone through the roof. And now we're seeing, as life gets sort of back to normal or mostly back to normal, we're seeing leasing staff say, hey, actually, we want to stay with the self-guided tour solutions because now we have a lot more opportunity to focus on retention and hosting resident events and engaging with our current resident base. So, that's just, I could talk forever about self-guided tours, but that's just one sort of slice of the pie when it comes to multifamily technology and what groups are looking at when they look to say, hey, how do we implement new technology and how does it impact our business?
Yeah, I think it's really good points there. One on just the technology itself, but also the adaptation from a user standpoint. The technology's been there for 5, 7, 8 years, if not more. But between property management companies, renters themselves, or applicants, and then owners, maybe there wasn't that drive to adapt to that technology. So that behavior hadn't shifted just yet. And now we are seeing more of that take place. Great points there. So talking about the suite of PointCentral's offering, right? We're talking about data. We're talking about, self-guided tours, but give me the range. I mean, where exactly does PointCentral come in to help?
Sure. Really what we start with is the base solution being the lock, the thermostat, and any other types of device that may benefit the asset, usually water sensors, things of that nature. We start there at a base level because that's sort of the Trojan horse to everything else. We start there and that immediately provides opportunities for staff to gain operational benefits. And I'll tell you how. We'll typically integrate with the property's primary property management software. Think of like a Yardi or a RealPage. And when we do that, not only does the property staff usually sort of live in that home-based software solution, but the integration on the back end with just a lock and a thermostat will ensure that when a resident is moved into that, I'll use Yardi as an example, when they're moved into Yardi, that resident automatically receives a welcome email. And within 30 seconds, they have a smart apartment. They're controlling whatever devices are there. When the resident moves out, and I really love this operationally, is not only do they lose access to the devices that were in their former unit, but as a result of integrating with the software, automatically that unit goes into vacant unit status, which ensures the thermostat goes into energy management mode and the door is locked. So we've already done two things right there that maintenance has to do manually today and may not have time to get to various other tasks throughout the building. So, when we start to add up, 15, 20, 25% savings from an energy standpoint, that's significant savings when we start to look at operators that have portfolios in the tens of thousands of unit range. So significant impact financially, but also the savings in time. So PointCentral will start there. And then what we found is we're starting to work our way outside of the in-unit component and into the common areas. And that's where access control solutions come into play. That's where intercom solutions come into play, self-guided tours, which we touched on a little bit. So now we don't just have the smart apartment, quote unquote. We're really moving towards smarter communities as a whole. And the fact that we can deliver that on one seamless platform, so we're not having to integrate 6 or 7 different apps to solve different challenges, that's where we're starting to see rapid adoption because groups are now recognizing there's this opportunity to streamline these various technologies onto a single trusted solution.
Yeah, and when you think about it from our standpoint, right, as an operator, you're really focused on the NOI. I mean, that is the most important aspect of what we're trying to do. And, resident appreciations and, understanding the sentiment and all those things are very important, mainly because they drive the retention. And if you are able to retain residents and you don't have to turn over those units, then you can have a greater NOI. So even if you're not as concerned with having the latest technology on the thermostats and putting all the smart locks in there, from a business standpoint, from an NOI standpoint, there's definitely some advantages for upgrading it. Let's talk a little bit on just how this works from more of a practical standpoint. I know there's obviously some varying costs that are involved. Are these costs able to be billed back to residents, or is this kind of an investment that owners make in order to be able to reduce or at least predict what those expenses are going to be?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're seeing a little bit of both. The reality is, I feel like we're still in the early stages of adoption. I think we've sort of graduated from that, just the early adopters, and we're starting to get into groups that are seeing more practical business outcomes from this. Having said that, still early enough now to where a lot of groups will implement some type of a rent lift as a result of having the technology. So that on its own is generally positive, but I would say, if they're just moving forward for the rent lift, then you're subject to market circumstances, which can be altered quickly. In fact, they could be altered by just the community across the street implementing some type of new amenity or this type of technology. So really the primary cause to move forward is it is an investment in the property and a job aid for the on-site staff. So that's primarily what we're seeing. And groups that sort of build or buy and hold are seeing these residual impacts by saying, okay, we feel like we can attract the more technologically savvy resident base. But for those that are looking to move on from a property fairly quickly, we're seeing the increase of the asset and value increase just as a result of having the technology. And that's become attractive for both buyers and sellers.
Can you give me some context on that, right? Either the increase in value or the efficiency that it provides to the on-site staff, whether that's maintenance or leasing times. Can you give me some context just so we can wrap our head around the kind of impact this has?
Sure. So on average, the average 200 unit building is saving up to 200 man hours per year or team member hours per year as a result of having the technology. Some of that comes from what I described in that property management software automation. Some of that comes from self-guided tours and having leasing agents focus their time and attention on something that's more retention focused as opposed to resident generation focused. So those are a couple examples of how time can be saved. In fact, one of our maintenance friends said something that really resonated with me. And he said, wow, more wrench time, less time key fishing, because key codes and access codes can now be implemented for maintenance and vacant units rather than having to sort of wait around for 6 or 7 keys to be issued. So that's one of the direct benefits we're seeing just in terms of time. We've seen assets increase 20 to 25% on the resale. And we can't say it was entirely because of the technology, but the technology played a part in that resale value being an increase.
Now, I think it's great though to hear, right? 200 man hours being saved annually on a 200 unit apartment community. Seeing that increase in the value, 20, 25%, not solely based on technology, but obviously the technology story being a part of what's driving that growth. Who is this for? I mean, what's the break even number? If I've got a 5 unit, should I be considering this, or is that really above? Is there a strike number where, hey, below this, don't waste your time. But if you're at this unit count or higher, or this, whatever rent number or higher, this is where it starts to make sense.
We're seeing it in communities that are typically over 100 units. But having said that, some of the smaller assets, they may not have or likely don't have centralized leasing offices, or they might have maintenance solutions that are outsourced. So even on the smaller buildings, we're still seeing adoption for different reasons.
Got it. Makes sense there. And are you seeing it more with property management companies as well? So it's less about maybe that individual owner, but as a property management firm, are they kind of adopting this? And this is like a service almost that they're, whether it be white labeling or something that they're helping to provide to those property owners with smaller portfolios?
Yeah, well, we're absolutely seeing that on the management side as well, whether it's, own and manage or third party manage. They have to at least be familiar with it, because it's not uncommon for, a third party manager to sort of inherit the new technology. It could be at a building that already exists and they've just been hired. So we're really not seeing a whole lot of limitation in types of properties or even types of asset class.
Interesting. You mentioned the types of asset class. Elaborate a little bit there.
Sure. So, the standard luxury asset that's kind of coming out of the ground, which seems to be it's kind of the only thing we're building right now for affordability reasons. It's almost a no-brainer for them. They want a provision for the technology at the onset. They know that it has to go in, and so they want to do that from the start. But what we've seen that's really interesting is like a B-class asset, for example. They'll be very upfront. Hey, we won't go from a B to an A, but we want to be the best B on the block, and that will help optimize rent. The student housing environment, the student population, they don't know life without a smart device, and so they expect a lot of technology when they move into a property. And so the student housing environment's been very, very interesting. even on the workforce housing environments, we're seeing those types of groups operate under smaller margins. And so for them, there is more impact by saying, look, if we can save 15 to 20% on utilities, that's a big number for them when we start to aggregate the total number of units they have in either a portfolio or even a single building.
I think it's interesting because most operators get the need from a luxury standpoint. If you got a Class A apartment building or apartment community, having technology, smart technology makes sense because it's something that renter is looking for. But you talked about the student housing and even that C-class resident, where it still may make sense there because now it may be less about an amenity that the resident's looking for versus one, just their expectation, or it can actually help you just manage costs and expenses. And I know I did an interview a while back, and there was another technology that was mostly focused on smart locks. But one thing that really stood out to me was the fact that if you're doing a lot of renovations, you have different contractors and electricians and plumbers and different personnel coming through. But this also allows you to kind of keep track of who's accessing the property, who's going in and out of what unit, at what time did they show up, you have all this data now that you can track, as opposed to just having a lockbox. You don't really know who's in, who's not there, whether or not they took the key. So this key code at least allows you to track a little bit more. And, the more knowledge you have, the better it is for you to control that situation and the outcomes that come out of that, particularly if you're in a property where it's not making money right now or the unit's not making money right now, and you have a lot of people kind of going in and out. So just something to think about is, how can this be another tool in the tool belt to help you drive revenue and see growth for your apartment community? Now, obviously, we've been talking about apartments. This is multifamily insights, but I imagine this technology is not limited to multifamily apartments. Where else are you seeing this technology play out, and how does that application differ from apartments?
The short-term rental space is certainly seeing this type of adoption as well. And I think for that environment, it's primarily key management, where there are no on-site team members in a vacation property. So for someone to arrive on vacation with their family, they don't want to drive to a separate leasing office to grab their keys. So access codes for that environment has been kind of the catalyst to adoption, as has the property management software integrations on that side applies as well, because if someone moves out, or they shouldn't move out necessarily, but their vacation ends and they move on, they don't want that air conditioning to stay at 68 until the next person comes in for a new vacation stay.
No, great insights right there. As we think about where things are headed, technology is ever changing, especially the prop tech space. What's in the near future? What kind of things are you working on? What's on the wish list that you all are looking to roll out by the end of the year?
For us, deeper integrations with relevant technologies, deeper insights for our customers, the property managers, understanding more about consumption rates and usage. And, an example there is we have a really interesting HVAC analytics platform that can identify when a system is troubled before the resident or before maintenance knows about it. And so, those types of things, what we're seeing is we're now taking what has historically been a very reactive maintenance model and making it a proactive, if not even a preventative maintenance model. So they can get to something before it becomes a significant issue or challenge. Leak detection is the same way. These are things that are big cost burdens for everyone, right? So whether it's the asset owner or manager that has to deal with a leak, or the resident that's displaced because the resident, above them, had a leak and it flooded down. Those are the types of insights we continue to focus on and attempt to deliver for our customer base, because there's just so much that we can glean from the data and from these sensors and these connected communities that will allow for better management and overall a better experience.
Yeah, I love that, man. I mean, if you can detect these issues in advance and be more preventative as opposed to just reactionary, it allows you to maintain value and also have a greater story on either your exit or manage your cost accordingly in your CapEx. Let's talk about the numbers a little bit, right? What are we talking about for installation, operations, kind of the ongoing for PointCentral's technology?
It really depends on what types of hardware you want installed in the building. But, typical package is around $500 for hardware on a per unit basis. And then there's software costs as well. And some of that's also dependent just on what types of solutions they're looking for. But all that said, it's usually around $10, on a per unit per month basis, sometimes less depending on volume. And that's driving significant value when we start to see groups that are turning the ROI around within 18 months.
There you go. Good to hear. And obviously, if they want to learn more, they can check you out or they can go to the website, PointCentral.com. Mike, what's the best way for them to reach out to you directly?
Check me out on LinkedIn. So, I'm certainly, accessible there. And there's my contact information is there. I just love having conversations about the technology and meeting asset owners and developers. So would look forward to any conversations that come my way.
All right, excellent. We're going to move on to a round of insights. Mike, give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
About 15 years ago, I helped co-found the industry's first smart apartment solution. It was called Remotely, and it was a wonderful product, but I would say that it was ahead of its time, and ultimately challenging because it was ahead of its time. So it's always humbling to be maybe 5 or 6 years too early, and then to have the opportunity to come back around and say, wow, we learned all those great things and now the market is ready for this, which is, where my life is now at PointCentral. But those types of failures, they say you usually learn more from those than you do from the wins. And I would certainly agree with that.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Digital resource in terms of kind of like a education or a knowledge resource?
Yeah, education or knowledge, anything you use to communicate with your team, anything you use for communicating with clients, anything like that.
Yeah, we're a big Teams shop, and I think, whether it's Teams or another platform, I think the DMs today are just, quick, actionable communication methods that for us, it goes a long way because a lot of us are remote and we need to be able to communicate quickly on the fly.
There you go. Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Atomic Habits, James Clear. I think I bought about a dozen of those just to hand out to team members and friends, and I continue to utilize that book as a resource.
Yeah, I'm a big Atomic Habits fan myself, so great book there. All right. Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
I start and end each day with 3 things that I'll write down. And that's either focus initiatives for the day, people initiatives, someone I want to reach out to, call them out for kudos or a job well done, or an idea. And then I'll end the day with 3 things. And that way it sort of keeps me on track and accountable to my priorities, but also keeps me connected to people where, I don't want the day to go by so quickly that I forget to be a good human.
There you go. Great points there. All right. Give me your number one insight. And I'm going to say for implementing prop tech in our multifamily portfolios.
Understanding all the stakeholders early into the conversation. It's still fairly new, so not uncommon for multiple stakeholders at an organization to have input, ideas, or thoughts. And so, I think the important thing there is whether you're sitting on my side as like a vendor partner, or you're on the manager side, it's identifying the right people early to have just a good conversation about the impact the product will have on the business and who all the key players are to help understand and have that conversation.
All right. You are in Denver, Colorado, nice food city. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
I love Mexican food. Los Dos Patrios. There's 3 or 4 locations, and I've been to all of them. Excellent place for chips, salsa, and just good Mexican food.
Love it. Great tips there, Mike. Listen, really enjoyed our conversation today. You gave some really nice insights on, why we should be looking into prop tech, specifically some of the values and the advantages that PointCentral has to offer. And the fact that it's not just about, this cool, luxurious amenity that tech-friendly renters are looking for. This is also a cost savings. It allows you to have more control over leak detection or access to the units and leasing and being able to do virtual tours. So I think all this makes a lot of sense. And it's something that multifamily investors should continue to think about whether or not it makes sense for them as another tool in their multifamily tool belt to drive the NOI. Again, for anybody who wants to learn more or to connect with you, they can go to pointcentral.com or check out Mike on his LinkedIn, which we will have linked in our show notes. Mike, thanks again for coming on the show. We hope you have a great day. We look forward to staying in touch.
You as well, John. Thanks for having me.